people don't binge shows over and over again unless it's something like The Sopranos.
That's a case where people do binge shows.
Yeah, or like The Office.
They have. The Office. The Office. Okay, could this hit some kind of Office level nostalgia that people put on as they're going to bed? You know what I mean? People put on and watch
Maybe.
throughout the entire holiday season. Could this be bigger, this Harry Potter show on HBO? Could this be the next biggest thing to Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
I think the short answer is yes. I think it could be, and I think there's a lot going for it. Let me read a few stats real quickly because I wanted to just hit this. So like, I was thinking through like, how do you kind of gauge this? How can you know if it's going to be bigger than Game of Thrones? And there's a few obvious points. The potential audience size. Listen to this. The Harry Potter books have sold over 600 million books.
Mhm.
All right. Game of Thrones, the books for Game of Thrones have sold 90 million. All right. And then you have the movies, which collectively have made $7.7 billion over their lifespan.
Yeah.
7.7 billion. All right. Compared to like, and there's not really a number amount for the Game of Thrones, but it was one of the highest viewed shows on HBO ever.
Yeah.
And so there was consistently an average of around 10 million viewers watching an episode of Game of Thrones. Okay.
Yeah.
So those are kind of like a few key points to think through. In my mind, I'm surprised that the Harry Potter movies did not hit 10 billion. You know what I mean? Especially since there's 8 movies. That's beside the point. I think just the book sales and just the diversity of age for audience size and just what I hear on the streets, you know, Harry Potter its audience is pretty big.
I would 100% agree with you. And I do think this will probably either be as big or bigger than Game of Thrones.
I think this is going to be much bigger than Game of Thrones.
There is one caveat though.
Okay.
And I was pretty young, I feel like, when Game of Thrones was coming out. And I jumped on board season 7 and then 8. So the last 2 seasons.
You were late. I jumped on season 5.
Yeah, I jumped on late, and then so I binged all up to 7. Then I watched with people 7 and 8. And I remember I was working at Lowe's at the time, and I had a couple managers that Lowe's is friendly to, you know, veterans, and like these old military guys would like working at Lowe's because of the type of job that it is, you know, hard construction worker veteran guys.
Sure.
And every Sunday they would be like, yeah, we got to get out of work in time to go watch our Game of Thrones. And they're talking about the next drama thing. Jon Snow's the actual king. And these hardcore veteran guys that are in their 50s
are wrapped up into the story.
Are wrapped up in the drama. But yet I don't see them being like, yeah, you know, Ron and Hermione, Ron smooched Hermione.
Yeah, no. Not the same crowd, right?
Not the same crowd. Even though I think that Harry Potter has a bigger crowd, it's not. Older men can enjoy Game of Thrones. They're not going to enjoy this.
Well, it's questionable, right? Because it just depends on the quality of storytelling. Now, I will say one thing that they don't have going for them is the theories and the excitement to see what happens next that Game of Thrones had. All right. Yeah. Because at the end of the day,
we know what's going to happen.
We may not know a new story beat, like something where they're subverting the expectation, diverting from the book a little to tell a new story beat. At the end of the day, we know what happens in Harry Potter. You know what I mean? We not only have the books, we have movies that were made about the books, you know? So you don't even have to be a book viewer to know that, uh, Sirius Black escapes from Azkaban. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like you
which
don't.
that's gonna be cool. That
Yeah, but I'm
show
just
us
saying.
that. I hope they show us that. That
I'm
would be
just
fun.
saying, like, we know the beats to the story. And so we're going to be missing that excitement for
Mhm.
what's going to happen next, which Game of Thrones had such
Yeah.
a monopoly on. And so, although I think the audience has the ability to make this a much bigger show, will we experience as much excitement from the show that we did from Game of Thrones? I'm going to say it's going to be thrilling. It's going to be fun. I think it could be enjoyable as long as they don't screw it up. I don't think it's going to be as exciting as Game of Thrones,
No. There
right?
I mean, if you look at shows over the years, like, I'm talking about, like, 80s, 90s, even before that, the really popular shows like Lost and, I'm losing some that I had in there, was they had those. Somebody who shot Steve, and then you have to wait till the next
Mhm.
week to
Mhm.
find out who shot Steve. You know, because you've read the books. You know, because you've seen the movies. But
Yes.
um, so I would agree. The more popular shows have those things that we can't have in this.
The other thing is kind of like, what's the life of this show after it is finished? So
Hmm.
when I'm 40 years old, you know what I mean? And the show's wrapped, they told the story. It's been 10 years, more than that for the actors, right? Um, because of like production and everything. It's been 10 years. The show is done. We have a brand new body of work for Harry Potter. And it's not just the Daniel Radcliffe movies. Now we have this HBO series that potentially might be loved more than the movies are. What's the life of that? And I think it's pretty high because
Hmm.
the rewatchability that people have for those Harry Potter movies,
Yeah.
it's like people never stopped watching them.
Mm-mm.
They know what's going to happen. People like it's like the Lord of the Rings thing. It's like every year
Yeah.
they do their marathon.
It
And
feels like, yeah, like a Christmas movie that you come back to every year. You
but the
watch again.
question is, will people do their marathon of Harry
The
Potter
show.
series of a show,
I
right?
mean, 8 seasons,
A lot
7
bigger
seasons,
commitment.
yeah, that's hard to do because it's a lot to binge, but
It's a lot to binge, but will people love it enough and do the same thing that they've done for the movies? Or will they just be like,
and
good show? I'm going to keep watching the older movies though.
you're convincing me that people aren't gonna it's not gonna be as big as we've been claiming this whole time, because do people watch Game of Thrones again? Do people go back and binge the whole show?
Well, I do. I usually
Well,
do
you
like
do and I do, but I mean, that's people don't binge shows over and over again unless it's something like The Sopranos. And so,
but
actually,
that's a case where people do binge shows.
yeah, or like The
They
Office.
have. The Office. The Office. Okay, could this hit some kind of Office level nostalgia that people put on as they're going to bed? You know what I mean? People put on and watch
Maybe.
throughout the entire holiday season. Like what is it? Is this going to replace and just have more streaming hours because there's a lot more screen time than the older movies? Like, are
Maybe.
the older movies viewership just gonna fall off, and then this
It
is just going to
definitely
have lastability after the show's done and rolled out? Are they just people going to keep watching them?
I definitely think that it has to hit something. And because we're talking about 10 years and like 10 years plus 2 at this point, so 12 years from now, I definitely think it's going to have to. That's a long time into the future. So how are we going to be even consuming content then? It's like, if you
Mhm.
think about The Office was popular when it was on TV, but the actors and people that were part of The Office have openly said it was popular, but it got so much more popular, got way bigger when it started going to streaming service and people could binge it. It
Netflix for a long time.
Yes,
For a long
it
time.
got a new life after the show was done that that we, our generation, sees now, and is there going to be something like that in the future? How are we going to consume content like this in 12 plus years? Is there going to
Well,
be a new thing that we're watching the Harry Potter show on, and that's what ultimately it comes down to? Because it could be a great show, but if streaming dies and this show dies with streaming, then it's not the show's fault. It's streaming and how we consume
well,
content.
streaming. It's hard to say streaming's going to die because you also have
No,
to
I don't
consider.
think so either, but I mean, this is the future we're talking about.
Right.
The world, I mean, anything could happen. I mean, we could
Well, here's
are
a here's
we gonna be
here's
watching it during the zombie apocalypse that's happening in 8 years.
okay. Assuming there's not going to be a zombie apocalypse.
I mean,
Um, the good thing that's a little bit hopeful for people in this niche of telling stories through cinema, right?
mhm,
Is the fact that across all time of human beings, people love stories. You know
mhm,
what I mean? They love to be told a good story. Cinema has reached the peak of telling a story through audio, video, and it looks as realistic as it can get. Like we now have animation and cameras and everything that is the highest form of technology. When you're watching something on screen, it looks as real as if the person's sitting next to you. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So we've reached the top of reality in telling stories using all of the senses. The only thing, what you got, smell-o-vision? I don't think smell-o-vision's ever going to take off.
mm,
But outside of that, it's like we might be sitting here for a long time because what else can you can do like the VR experience, right?
yeah,
But honestly, at the end of the day, you're hanging out with your family or your friends. Do you all want to just go to a VR world to watch your movie? Or do you
mm-mm,
just want to pop it on a screen like a box or a wall, you know what I mean? And just watch your show next to you. You know what I mean? I think people like the window into another world.
mhm,
And I think people are going to enjoy the VR experience in the gaming realm, but because that's when it's more engrossing, it's interactive. But if you're just being told a
engrossing.
story, engrossing, like it's more bringing you into that realm because you're going to engage with it, right?
Okay,
In the gaming sense. But if you're just going to be told a story and you're just going to observe, to enjoy and listen to and see this story take place, I don't think people want to be in a VR world to do that, you
no,
know? Um,
yeah, I think we
so
will
I think
see
I
the
think
future.
I think streaming, I don't know what the future of streaming is going to look like, but at the end of the day, whatever the future is, it's going to be how do people play this window into this story? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, that's what it's going to be at the end of the day. It could be like you just have a hologram that pops up and there's your window. I mean, who knows what it's going to look like? But I don't think shows like this necessarily die when streaming dies. And at the same time, the internet is opening up a new universe in a lot of
yeah,
ways. And so it's like streaming is just pulling video off the internet. So I don't think that's going away anytime soon, you know?
mhm,
Um, so to answer the question, I wanted to point out this one other thing. The budget, they said it's probably going to be on par, if not bigger than the creators basically alluded to this. It's going to be on par, if not bigger than the budget they saw for House of the Dragon. House of the Dragon was spending about 20 million an episode, right?
mhm,
And they spent over 100 million in marketing. So we're talking well over 200 million
yeah, a lot.
to market and create like a season for House of the Dragon. Um, so this is going to be on par, if not a bit larger than that, budget wise. So could this be the next biggest thing to Game of Thrones? I think it's going to have everything needed to be bigger than Game of Thrones. But I think we made a good point. The excitement level, right? And
Mhm,
I also think it has a good chance of I think has a good chance of replacing the old movies and people watching this
Mhm.
like after it's done. I think it has the lifespan of this is a long time past the series is done. But I think there's going to be a level of excitement that's missing that we always are missing
Yeah.
when we're telling a story that the majority of the population already knows. Now, remember, people who read the books of Game of Thrones knew what was going to happen until we got to the part of the show where there wasn't any books left for it.
Mhm.
But then everybody disliked it anyway. Like, people don't like the end of the Game of Thrones because they're like, this
Man,
doesn't feel like the same thing.
I'm still gonna be salty about that. I had moments that, I didn't like about Game of Thrones, but I think it was what they gave us. If you don't like the thing they served you, then get out of the restaurant. If you don't
No,
like what they're
no.
serving on the menu,
I
then get out of the
disagree with this.
restaurant.
I disagree with this point because they were serving you one thing that was really good and tasty for a long time. And then they decided to switch it up on you and deliver you something to your table that you didn't order. Like,
Hey,
that's what Game of Thrones did.
I
All right?
know most people enjoy a good steak, but some people enjoy a little bit of meatloaf. Meatloaf is good sometimes. Even though it's not steak, I'll enjoy a meatloaf once in a while.
Look, I'll say
So,
this. The end of Game of Thrones is a lot better than like Rings of Power. All right?
yeah.
The end of Game of Thrones is a lot better than the whole Rings of Power show. However,
Yes.
it is not up to standard to what like the first 6 seasons delivered to us, seasons 7 and 8 really fell flat compared to what 6 seasons before that gave to us.
Mhm.
And that's what was disappointing. It was disappointing. That's why there's so much hate around it. Disappointment. So Harry Potter, don't disappoint us now.
Mm-mm.
And
Don't do
you
it.
might have the
Don't do it.
ability to maybe not be as exciting
Mhm.
as Game of Thrones was for a large amount of the population week to week. But I think you'll see just as much love and just as much attention and just as much joy and enthusiasm around the show, and potentially a lot bigger of an audience than Game of Thrones.